My name is Chloe, I'm 27 years old and I live with my husband, Nathan, in a small wooden house on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. People always say our home looks romantic, like a peaceful painting nestled among tall pine trees and birdsong in the morning. They call us the perfect couple, Nathan with his warm smile and me, always gently walking beside him in the evenings around the lake. But that was just a beautiful curtain I once tried to keep from being pulled back. We've been married for 1 year. 1 year is long enough to realize that love without honesty and care will rot in the silence no one dares to break. When we first met, Nathan was like a spring breeze. Thoughtful, gentle, always making me feel like I was the only woman in the world. He came into my life one evening at a local art exhibit. I was working there as a program coordinator and kids art teacher. I used to think finding a man who truly understood me was a blessing. I was wrong. 6 months after the wedding, Nathan no longer made me feel safe. He came home later, sometimes saying nothing, just dropped his bag on the chair and turned the TV up loud. Some nights when I tried to ask how his day was, he'd glance at me, nod half-heartedly, then retreat into silence. I didn't know when the warmth in his eyes had been replaced with something so cold it scared me. I remember the first time he spoke to me with that bitter tone. "Can you stop pretending? No one needs you to act happy." I froze. In that moment I had no idea what I'd done wrong. I didn't leave right away because I still had hope. Every time Nathan softened, held me and said I'm just tired, I convinced myself it would be okay. I started blaming myself. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I wasn't enough. But no matter how hard I tried to hold on to dinner conversations or simple moments of connection, everything fell into silence. One day I made his favorite meatball soup, lit candles, played the song he loved. He walked into the kitchen, glanced at the table and silently opened the fridge to grab a soda. "Don't overdo it, Chloe," he said, not even looking at me. "Everything you're trying? It's pointless." My heart felt crushed. Not by his words, but by the way he didn't care. I started feeling like a stranger in my own home. Every morning I woke up, I had to choose between staying silent to keep the peace, or speaking up and getting that same cold stare from the man I once trusted. The tenderness we once had only existed in my memory, and I felt completely lost in this marriage. Then, on our first wedding anniversary, Nathan told me to pack a bag. He had a surprise. "A trip," he said. "I want us to go back to where it all began, where we first camped together," Nathan said, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. I was confused, but I nodded. Even with doubt filling my heart, I held on to a sliver of hope. Maybe this was the start of something new. But deep down, I couldn't shake the growing unease. I didn't know that trip would mark the moment I would never be the same again. Nathan chose Pine Grove Falls, over 2 hours from our house, nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains. That was where he took me on our first camping trip after we met. I remember sitting on a moss-covered rock, my hand in his, listening to the roar of the waterfall like nature's own symphony. I thought if any place could bring emotions back, it was there. We left early. On the drive I tried to start conversations, but Nathan only gave short, distant responses. He barely glanced at me. Familiar country music played in the car, but unlike before, neither of us sang along. The silence was so thick I could hear my own heartbeat every time he sped up. When we turned onto the dirt road leading to the trail, a chill crept into my chest despite the summer heat. Nathan parked under a big oak tree, then pulled a backpack and water bottle from the trunk. "Let's go, it's not far," he said, still avoiding my eyes. The trail was steep but surrounded by tall trees. Everything looked calm and still. I followed him quietly, ignoring the harsh sunlight bouncing off his dark blue shirt, the one I gave him last Christmas. As we neared the waterfall, its thunderous sound echoed through the forest, strong, overwhelming, haunting. Nothing had changed. The same stone ledge by the falls, the same maple tree casting shadows on the clear water. I stepped closer to the edge, took a deep breath. "We used to sit here," I whispered, trying to hold on to a piece of what we had. Nathan stood behind me, silent. Then his voice came. Lower. Different. "Chloe, have you ever wondered if things would have been different if it hadn't all started here?" I turned around, puzzled. "What do you mean?" Wind swept through, tossing my hair into the air. His eyes locked on mine, not cold anymore, but hollow. "I've been thinking a lot," Nathan said, monotone like he'd rehearsed it. "About life, bad choices, being trapped. I took a step back, my palms starting to sweat. Nathan, if something's wrong, we can talk. We can. No, Chloe, we can't. He cut me off, eyes finally meeting mine. I didn't bring you here to fix anything. I came to end it. I didn't even have time to understand before it happened. Nathan stepped forward, his hand on my shoulder, not gentle, but with a sudden push that knocked me off balance. I felt my body tilt back, the sound of the waterfall roaring in my ears, drowning out my scream. In a flash, the sky flipped, and I slammed into the freezing water. Shock took over. I thrashed, struggling to reach the surface. The slippery rocks underfoot gave no grip. Water poured into my mouth, my nose. I panicked, but amid the chaos, a faint voice echoed in my mind. My mother's voice. Calm down, Chloe. Don't fight the water. Let it carry you. I closed my eyes, forced my body to relax. I felt myself drifting in the current, not knowing how long it took before my hand caught onto a floating branch. I pulled myself onto a mossy riverbank, shaking, dizzy. My clothes were torn, my palms scraped, my breath ragged, but I was still alive. And in that moment, between the rushing water and wind in the trees, I knew one thing. Nathan wasn't angry. He had planned it. Every step. Every detail. He didn't want me coming back. But I was still here. I wasn't done. And I wouldn't let things end the way he wanted. I dragged myself along the creekside, soaked clothes clinging to me, my knees bloodied, hands scraped raw from grabbing slippery roots and rocks. Every step felt like dragging a dead weight. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. Nathan thought I was gone, and if I revealed myself too soon, he'd win. After nearly an hour pushing through thick woods, I spotted a narrow trail with tire tracks. In the distance, I heard an engine, a lifeline pulling me from the edge of fear. I limped toward the sound, burst out of the trees, waving wildly, throat dry as I shouted, "Please, stop." A rusty old pickup screeched to a halt a few yards away. A man in his 50s wearing a plaid shirt and a ball cap jumped out. "Good Lord, are you okay?" I nodded weakly, grabbing the car door. I fell, near Pine Grove Falls. Please, don't ask anything. I just need to call a friend. Without hesitation, he opened the passenger door and helped me climb in. "Name's Bill, I live nearby. There's a little roadside diner down the way. Signal's better there. I'll take you." I didn't say another word on the way. Only one name echoed in my mind. Grace. The only person I trusted, my best friend since college. I knew if anyone could help me, it was her. When we got to the diner, I borrowed Bill's phone and dialed Grace. "Chloe," her voice was panicked. "Oh my gosh, what's wrong with your voice?" "No time. Nathan tried to hurt me. Can you come get me? I'm at Pine Grove Deli about an hour outside Asheville. Don't tell anyone, please." She was silent for a moment, then firmly said, "I'm on my way. Keep the line open, don't hang up." Bill handed me a wool cardigan and brought over a mug of hot cocoa. Then he quietly sat in the corner without asking a single question. I sat there gripping the cup, my eyes staring blankly at the foggy window. I knew deep down, ever since the moment Nathan pushed me over that waterfall, I was no longer the same Chloe. A little over an hour later, the diner door swung open. Grace walked in, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. She froze, then rushed over and wrapped me in a trembling hug. Chloe, I thought you..." "I'm okay. I'm still here. But Nathan thinks I'm not. And I need to keep it that way." On the drive back, I told Grace everything. My voice rough, but the memories etched in my mind. She didn't interrupt, just held my hand tightly. When we reached Grace's place, a small third-floor apartment in a quiet complex, she wrapped me in warm blankets and gave me painkillers. "Are you going to the police?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not yet. If I report it now, Nathan will deny everything. And who's going to believe a wife who suddenly reappears after vanishing?" Grace let out a heavy breath. "So what's your plan?" "To play dead," I said firmly. "I need time to gather evidence, find a lawyer and expose him, the right way." Grace nodded slowly. "Okay. You're not alone, I've got you." 3 days later, we had a plan. Grace's Aunt Lorraine lived alone in the Smoky Mountains, where cell signal was weak and visitors were rare. I'd stay there under a different name, Grace would pack up my things, erase my tracks, and spread the word that I went missing after a hiking trip. That night, as I stared at the dim light filtering through the curtains, I knew. The game had begun. Nathan had chosen his role as the grieving husband. I'd be the quiet force rewriting the whole play. I wasn't the woman trembling in the freezing water anymore. I was a survivor, and I was going to make him face every secret he thought was buried for good. Lorraine's small wooden cabin sat hidden in the misty Smoky Mountain forest, nearly 20 miles from the nearest town. No cell service, no internet, no one knew I was there except Grace. It was so quiet I could hear the wind whistle through the windows each night, the sound of my heartbeat echoing in the empty room, and all the memories I never asked for creeping in. I spent the first 3 weeks just recovering. My knee needed 8 stitches, my shoulder was bruised, and my palms were torn up from clawing at tree roots trying to climb out. But physical pain was nothing compared to what I carried inside. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nathan's face as he pushed me. Not wild or out of control, but cold and calculating, certain no one would ever find out. But I was alive, and I wasn't about to let this disappear into silence. Grace became my lifeline to the outside world. She returned to my apartment with Nathan, pretending to retrieve a few old belongings. With careful precision, she snuck out my laptop, a lockbox of important documents hidden behind a false drawer, and a hard drive I used to back up everything: photos, voice recordings, journals, scans of texts. In Lorraine's attic room, I rebuilt everything: timelines, memories, details of a marriage that seemed peaceful on the surface. On the laptop, I found emails from Nathan to a woman named Rachel W. Short messages, often referencing "once this is over." I didn't know who she was, but something told me Rachel was key. I reviewed old photos. Bruises on my wrists, mirror selfies I took whenever Nathan got angry. Once, I even filmed a short video of him yelling at me over burnt eggs. I kept it as proof in case something bad ever happens. I never expected it would become crucial to a future plan. Grace connected me with a lawyer named Elijah Turner, a domestic abuse specialist in his 30s who grew up watching his mother suffer. We communicated through encrypted emails and a secure platform Elijah set up to keep my location hidden. Each day passed with tension and planning. I couldn't afford a single mistake. We started gathering witnesses. Grace contacted Amanda, a former colleague who once witnessed Nathan shouting at me in a gallery meeting. Amanda agreed to write a statement, describing how I ran out mid-meeting, clearly frightened. Elijah insisted on complete secrecy, no public action, no hint that I was alive. "Want to land the final blow?" he said. "Let him think he's winning." And he did. Grace forwarded me a text Nathan had sent her. Maybe Chloe had an accident, but if she really disappeared, maybe that's a peaceful end. I read that line over and over, every word sliced through my heart. He wasn't grieving, he wasn't scared. Nathan was performing the guilty husband whose wife vanished. And that only made me more certain I had to tear that mask off before he took another step. One night, as the wind rattled the roof, I called Elijah over the secure line. "I have an idea," I said. "I want him to reveal his real face." "Chloe, that's risky. If he finds out you're alive." "That's why it has to be subtle. I won't show up, but we'll let him think someone out there knows more than he realized." I pictured the trap: an anonymous letter, a mysterious note in Nathan's mailbox, a fake witness claiming they saw me after the disappearance, a mind game to rattle him. We started with the simplest move: an unmarked envelope in Nathan's mailbox. Inside was a blurry photo from a distance: a woman at a bus stop in Waynesville, curly hair, beige cardigan, head slightly down. Not clear enough to confirm it was me, but enough to shake someone who thought I was gone. The photo came with a handwritten note in blue ink. "Chloe's not under the waterfall like you think." I didn't sleep the night we sent that through Grace. It was the first step in making Nathan walk into his own trap. Days later, Grace received a message from an unknown number. No name, no intro, just one line. "You know something? She didn't really die." We knew he was starting to crack. Elijah and I planned our next move: a fake witness. He hired a man named Harvey, a retired private investigator who now did freelance civil work. Harvey posed as a truck driver who claimed to have picked up a woman who looked just like Chloe on the interstate weeks after I vanished. The rumor spread fast, not through news outlets but among people who knew me and Nathan. Breadcrumbs were scattered, a strange call to my old job, an anonymous social post asking, "Anyone remember a girl named Chloe from Asheville?" Then came what we were waiting for. Nathan called Harvey. The first call was short, just probing. By the third call, Nathan set up a meeting at a bar in the suburbs. No security cameras. Elijah had prepared Harvey well. He wore a micro recorder on his belt and a special watch that logged time and location. That night, I sat frozen in Lorraine's cabin, clutching my phone like it might break. Each minute felt like my lungs were being squeezed. Then, Harvey sent the recording. Nathan's voice came through clearly behind the buzz of bar noise. "If you really saw her, and if you stay quiet, I'll take care of you. But if not, let's just say you never saw anything." Harvey asked. "You're asking me to keep quiet about seeing your wife?" "I'm asking you not to ruin what's already in place." I shook as I listened. Those words weren't just proof. They were the unraveling fear of a man who thought he'd buried his mistake, now trying to cover it with money and threats. Elijah sent the audio straight to authorities. With the help of an investigator named Marissa who specialized in family abuse cases, an official case file was opened. I hadn't come out of hiding yet, but now, I wasn't a missing woman anymore. I was a living witness. And I had my first solid evidence. 3 days later, an undercover officer approached Nathan, posing as one of Harvey's old friends. Their conversation was monitored, and this time, Nathan let it slip. He referenced the day at Pine Grove Falls. He didn't say exactly what happened, but the phrase, "things went smoother than I expected," was enough to raise red flags. I listened to that recording 5 times in one night. Each time I saw the truth more clearly. The man I once called husband hadn't just tried to erase me, he believed he had succeeded. And that arrogance, those slip-ups, every dirty dollar and hushed word, would be what took him down. I stared out the window. The trees stood still, like silent allies in my quiet revenge. Elijah called, his voice steady. "We have enough, and you still don't have to show yourself. Let him walk just a little further, until he pushes himself off the edge." I didn't answer right away. I looked toward the moonlight filtering through the pines and imagined the day Nathan would sit in an interrogation room, hearing his own voice, try to bargain with the truth. I smiled. "Let's keep going. This time, I'll win." I returned to Asheville on a crisp fall morning, the leaves lining the roads glowing gold. It had been nearly 3 months since the day I was pushed over Pine Grove Falls. 3 months in hiding, gathering proof, watching from a distance, waiting for the right time. And now, that time had come. I wasn't the terrified woman drowning in fear. I was back. For one reason, to face the truth and make Nathan pay. Grace met me at the bus station, her face tight with nerves and relief. "Are you sure?" she asked, gripping the wheel as we pulled out. I nodded. "There's no turning back. I've been ready for this day." Elijah had already scheduled the meeting with the city's police department, where we'd turn over everything, the recordings of Nathan and Harvey, photos of my injuries, witness statements, and most importantly, the emails between Nathan and Rachel, proving something was very wrong. The Special Investigations Unit took the case, and within 2 days, Nathan was summoned in connection with the unexplained disappearance of his wife. That morning I entered the waiting room with trembling hands. Elijah led the way, speaking to the officers while I sat next to Grace. The room was sterile, humming with cold fluorescent light, and all I could think about was that kitchen long ago when Nathan stood behind me, whispered, "You don't need to know too much." Now he would know how that felt. A young officer stepped out and called my name. I stood, legs shaky but my heart pounding with a strange new rhythm. Part fear, part something stronger. The interrogation room was small. 1 wooden table, 3 chairs, a camera in the corner. Nathan was already there. Back straight, hands folded neatly in his lap. He wore a white shirt, pale gray tie, his face calm like he was at a business meeting. But when I walked in, he turned. His eyes flicked toward me. And then, he froze. We looked at each other for a second that felt longer than a year. Neither of us said a word. Finally, Nathan mouthed silently, "Chloe, you..." I sat down and took a deep breath. "Yes, I'm still alive." The investigator seated between us started the interrogation. Mr. Nathan Myers, do you know why we asked you to come in today? Nathan inhaled, then nodded. It's about my wife's disappearance. I leaned forward. Or is it about the fact you tried to kill me? Nathan flinched, turning to me, his calm expression slipping. No, you slipped. I tried to, but you wouldn't listen. What about the recording? The line, things went smoother than I expected. Or the part where you offered a stranger money to stay quiet. Elijah cut in, sliding a folder toward the investigator. Everything after that felt like watching a movie in slow motion. Nathan denied it all, said I was paranoid, said I made it up. But piece by piece it all came out. Photos, statements, handwritten threats. And finally the recording of him bargaining with Harvey at the bar. Nathan's face turned pale. Sweat beaded on his temples. He stammered, fidgeted in his seat, then finally slammed his hand on the table. Fine, I admit it, but I didn't mean to kill her. I just wanted her out of my life. The room fell silent. I turned to the investigator. I officially pressed charges against Nathan Myers for attempted endangerment, psychological abuse, and conspiracy to conceal the truth. Nathan was handcuffed right then and there, head down, not saying another word. As he walked past me, his eyes weren't angry anymore, just lost and powerless. I watched him go, not feeling triumph, not bitterness, just an overwhelming lightness, like I had finally laid down a weight that had crushed me for far too long. Grace hugged me in the hallway. You did it, Chloe. I squeezed her hand gently and whispered, No, this is just the beginning. Because now I wasn't just going to survive, I was going to live fully, anchored in the truth I fought to reclaim. The trial was scheduled for mid-December, a winter that arrived early in Asheville, bringing thick fog and gray skies. But inside me a quiet fire still burned. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't hesitant. This time, I wouldn't just tell my story. I would make it undeniable. The Buncombe County Courthouse stood at the city center, an old stone building with a high dome and thick walls that seemed to whisper the echoes of 100 trials past. On the first day I sat in the witness waiting room, my palms freezing but my eyes locked on the door ahead. Grace sat beside me, her hand gently on my shoulder. No matter what happens, you did something most people never find the courage to do. I turned to her and whispered, I can't change the past, but I can protect my future. Nathan was escorted into the courtroom by 2 officers. He wore a light gray suit, head down, but I knew. He still believed this was a misunderstanding he could explain away, but not this time. There was no walking back. The prosecutor began by laying out the events, from the seemingly perfect marriage to the cracks, and finally my disappearance. Then came the physical evidence, the recording, the injury photos, texts, printed emails. Every detail pierced through the image Nathan had built. Then it was my turn. I walked up to the stand with shaking legs but a voice steadier than ever. I told my story, how I met Nathan, the way he first looked at me during that art workshop, the sweet things he used to whisper each night. Then I spoke of the changes, the cold stares, the sarcasm that turned into insults, the silence that suffocated our kitchen. I described the morning he told me to pack, the trip to Pine Grove Falls, how he smiled, and then pushed me without hesitation. I didn't cry, I didn't break down, I let the truth speak for itself, because the truth is powerful enough on its own. When the defense cross-examined, they tried to plant doubt. Maybe you slipped, maybe it wasn't intentional. I looked them straight in the eye and said firmly, no one just slips after saying, I came here to end things. My witnesses followed. Harvey described the recorded meeting. Amanda, my former co-worker, spoke about Nathan yelling in the gallery. Even a neighbor confirmed hearing violent arguments from our apartment many nights. Each testimony built a picture that no one could deny. The trial lasted 4 days. On the final day, Nathan was allowed to speak. He stood up, his eyes no longer sharp but hollow and drained. I didn't think it would go this far. I just felt trapped, he said. But I won't deny what I did. And if there's a price to pay, I'll pay it. When the jury returned, the courtroom held its breath. The judge rose, his voice echoing through the stillness. We find the defendant Nathan Myers guilty of attempted endangerment, psychological and physical abuse of his wife Chloe Myers. The defendant is hereby sentenced to 15 years in prison. I didn't cry, I didn't smile. I simply closed my eyes and took the deepest breath I'd taken in years. The air finally felt free. Grace hugged me tightly in the courthouse lobby. "I'm proud of you, not for winning, but for standing your ground." I nodded. I never needed to win, I just needed to be heard. For the first time in months, I stood in public with no fear, no shame. I was a witness, a survivor, a woman telling her story. 3 months after the trial, I still lived in Grace's apartment, not because I needed shelter, but because I wasn't ready to return to that old house. What once felt like a home now only held broken memories. Instead, I began to write. Not to seek pity, but to speak truth. I shared my story on a personal blog, at first just to sort my thoughts. But within weeks I started receiving letters. From women across the country. They called me the voice for the unspoken. One wrote she'd lived in silence for 7 years. Another said she thought leaving was pointless. Until my story helped her choose herself. I read every word, and for the first time in a long time I didn't just feel like a survivor. I felt seen. That's when the idea for a community project began to take shape. I had no experience running an organization, but I had one clear goal: to create a safe place, not just a shelter, but a space for emotional healing for those who had lived through what I had. I named the organization New Haven Path. Grace was the first to join without hesitation. Elijah helped connect us with a network of attorneys for abuse survivors. Lorraine, Grace's aunt, who once sheltered me in the mountains, offered her cabin as the first emergency support outpost. It wasn't easy. Legal paperwork, fundraising, grant applications. I doubted myself more than once. Then I received an email from a woman named Celeste in Florida. She wrote, "I've read everything you've posted. My husband never hit me, but he controlled everything: money, phone, friends. I thought I was just too sensitive, but because of you I realized I have the right to live fully. Thank you for giving me the courage I couldn't find on my own." I sat in silence for hours after reading that, and I knew this wasn't just an idea anymore, it was a mission. 3 months later, New Haven Path officially launched in Asheville. We started with an anonymous hotline, trauma support groups, and professional-led workshops. Every week, I take at least 2 calls, not as a counselor, but as someone who's been exactly where they are. I never say I understand how you feel. I only say I survived. And you can too. Word about the organization spread after an article in the Asheville Citizen-Times, followed by an interview on local TV. In that segment I shared my story, though I didn't focus on what happened at Pine Grove Falls. I spoke more about the fear of silence. About what it feels like to live in a relationship with no yelling, but every day feels like walking on shattered glass. The broadcast ended with my words. Silence isn't peace, and no one deserves to live in fear inside their own home. The following week we received over 200 emails. One woman from Colorado called at 3 a.m. saying she was standing between staying and leaving. I talked to her for an hour, repeating just one thing. You're not walking out alone. There are people waiting for you on the other side of fear. I knew I couldn't save the world, but I could open the first door for those still searching for a way out. 1 year after the trial, I stood in the auditorium of a large community center in Charlotte. In front of me were hundreds of people: survivors, advocates, lawyers, students, and journalists. I was invited to speak at the launch of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I stepped onto the stage, lights shining directly into my eyes, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I looked down at the front row, where Grace, Elijah, Lorraine, and women who had once stepped out of the shadows through New Haven Path sat watching. I said, "My name is Chloe, and I was pushed off a waterfall in my own life. But I swam back, not just to survive, but to help others find the shore." The room erupted in applause, but the clearest sound I heard was a small voice inside me, whispering, "You didn't stay silent, and because of that, others don't have to either." 1 year after Nathan's sentencing, I returned to the place where everything nearly ended, Pine Grove Falls, but this time, I didn't come alone. Beside me was Grace, steady like a lighthouse in a storm, and around me were 6 women who had once walked into New Haven Path with fear in their eyes and broken hearts. They came from different places: Oklahoma, Georgia, even New Jersey. Each carried a different story but shared one thing in common: they didn't give up on themselves. I returned to Pine Grove not to challenge my memories but to close a door, not with forgetfulness, but with courage. The trail to the falls was still the same, rugged and covered in fallen leaves. The sound of rushing water was just as loud as the first time I heard it, the moment I was pushed, but now the waterfall's roar wasn't haunting. It was the heartbeat of freedom, the sound that reminded me I was still here, stronger than ever. We stopped at the large rock, the last place I saw Nathan's face before I plunged into the freezing water. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, my hand trembling slightly as I opened it. Inside was my wedding ring, still heavy and silent, like the years I spent loving a man who once seemed like everything, until I learned that love isn't enough to preserve someone's humanity. I held the ring. The cold metal against my skin brought back that autumn afternoon when he slid it onto my finger beneath golden trees. I had thought it was the beginning of forever. I never imagined that same hand would one day push me off a cliff with no warning. I looked at everyone around me. Grace gave a small nod, her eyes saying, "You've come so far, it's time." I tightened my grip on the ring, then opened my palm at the edge of the rock. "I'm leaving this here," I said slowly. "Not because I forgot, but because I forgive myself." And then I let it go. The ring fell, catching the late afternoon sun before vanishing into the rushing current. No echo, no answer. Just a strange stillness, as if nature itself had accepted the silent goodbye. One of the women, her name was Jenna, who once fled her state with only 2 outfits and a baby in her arms, stepped beside me. She didn't say anything. She pulled from her pocket a broken necklace, once yanked from her neck during a fight. She dropped it after the ring and whispered, "That's the last time I let that memory hold me." One by one, each woman came forward with something small: a comb, a folded note, an old keychain. No one asked why, no one needed to. Each item was a farewell. As sunset fell, we sat together on the old stone ledge, sharing bread and hot tea. No one spoke about the men who hurt them. No one retold the pain that once brought them to their knees. Instead, we spoke of the future. About opening another center near Charlotte. About a girl who'd written asking to volunteer. About Grace's upcoming speaking event. When we left the falls, I turned back one last time. The water was still, as if it had never swallowed anyone. I placed a hand over my chest, feeling my heart beat. No longer frantic, no longer tight. I had returned to where everything nearly ended. To begin something new. In the car, Grace asked softly, "How do you feel?" I smiled, not turning back, eyes on the fading pines. Like I'm finally not carrying what never belonged to me. And it was true. That day, I didn't just let go of a ring. I let go of fear, of anger, of guilt I never deserved to carry. One January afternoon, I sat alone in the second-floor meeting room of the New Haven Path Center in Asheville. Outside, snow fell gently, like old memories that visit now and then, reminding me I once survived the coldest winter of my life. On the table was the speech I'd prepared for the upcoming National Conference on Victim Advocacy in Washington, D.C. I'd been invited as a representative of an independent organization that had helped more than 400 women in the past year reclaim their lives. A number I once thought impossible, when all this began with a personal blog. I reread the final lines of my draft. "I stand here not as a hero but as a survivor. I speak not just for myself but for the women who still can't, for those behind locked doors holding their children, heart racing, thinking silence is the only way to survive. They need to know they're not alone." I paused, crossed out the word survivor and replaced it with overcomer. Because by now I understood something. Overcoming isn't just surviving, it's the act of reclaiming the right to live, to dream, to love freely. In recent months, we'd opened 2 new branches in Charlotte and Knoxville. Grace now oversees the eastern region, while Jenna, the same woman who returned to Pine Grove with me, has become one of our lead counselors. She once told me during a team meeting, "Chloe, you didn't just save me, you gave me a chance to save myself. And now I want to give that to someone else. I didn't answer right away, I just nodded and thought, if there's one goal I have in this life, it might be that sentence. I received a thank you letter from a young woman named Emily, just 19 years old, who quietly collected evidence and left after 3 years, with a boyfriend 10 years older who controlled everything. In her letter she wrote, "You've never met me, but because of you, I had the courage to walk through the doors of New Haven Path. I don't call it running away anymore, I call it coming home." I printed her letter, framed it, and hung it in the hallway of our center. Every time I walk by, I pause for a few seconds, not to feel proud, but to remind myself those words are why I'll never stop. Recently, I was invited to join a legislative committee in North Carolina to propose new policies for protecting abuse survivors during legal proceedings. Elijah came with me to the first hearing. He's always been the quiet strength behind our legal efforts. After the session, he leaned in and said, "Chloe, you're not just a voice for survivors anymore, you're changing the way the system sees them." I didn't know what to say, but in my heart I felt deep gratitude, grateful that I lived, that I stood up, and that I chose not to stay silent. One night back at home, I opened an old photo I'd taken at Pine Grove Falls, before everything happened. In the picture, I'm young, full of hope, unaware I was standing on the thin line between love and betrayal. I looked into that girl's eyes and softly said, "Thank you for not letting go." Then I turned off the screen and looked out the window, where snow was falling lightly onto the roof, each white flake covering small cracks, like time healing what once felt impossible to mend. I had won not just in court, but in the journey through myself, and more than anything I knew, this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of a new chapter, where I keep fighting, keep listening, and keep being a voice for those who still can't speak. Because some lives are still waiting for a spark in the middle of winter. And I will be the one to light it. My story isn't just about escaping a painful marriage, it's proof of the strength and resilience and choosing to rise. From survivor to inspiration, I've helped hundreds of women break their silence. New Haven Path isn't just an organization, it's a symbol of hope, where wounds are heard and healing begins. And I know, no matter how long the road ahead, I will keep walking, both for myself and for those still waiting to find their voice. What are your thoughts on Chloe's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, emotional, and inspiring stories about life, family, and rebirth.